On the day we met to discuss the wedding, my parents wore clothes they had bought just for the occasion. We sat in the private dining room of a high-end French restaurant, waiting. 3 hours passed before my fiancé, Elliott, and his parents finally showed up. The moment his mother, Victoria, sat down, she pointed at the bowl of wild mushroom consommé in the center of the table and looked at my mother. Freda's mother, dear, would you mind ladling some soup for me? This silk dress is custom Valentino. I can't risk getting a drop of grease on it. Her tone was casually dismissive, the way one might address a hired maid. My temper flared, but Elliott caught my hand under the table, squeezing it gently. Freda, relax, he murmured, his voice low and soothing. Your mom is a housekeeper. She's used to serving. She's quick on her feet. My mom's never lifted a finger in her life. It's just a hand. Don't be so sensitive. My mother froze. She blinked, a shadow of embarrassment crossing her face, before she quickly wiped her hands on her stiff, new skirt. Forcing a polite smile, she stood up. It's fine, really. I've got it. She carefully spooned the soup, ensuring the ladle didn't drip, and offered the bowl with both hands. Victoria didn't even look up. She poked at the liquid with her silver spoon, her brow furrowing in deep distaste. You didn't even strain the herbs? Elliott has a delicate stomach. He can't possibly drink this with bits floating in it. My mother stood frozen, the color draining from her face. I'm so sorry, she stammered, looking utterly terrified of having caused offense. Let me get another bowl and strain it. Watching her stand there, so small and desperate to please, a sharp, burning ache rose in my chest. I stood up, pulled my mother back into her seat, and grabbed the bowl of soup. Without another word, I dumped it directly into the trash can by the sideboard. While Victoria gasped in shocked outrage, I turned my gaze to Elliott. I felt entirely cold, entirely calm. Elliott, I said, the wedding is off. Silence fell over the room, heavy and absolute, lasting for 3 long seconds. Victoria was the first to break it, her face twisting into an expression that suggested she had just heard a ridiculous joke. What did you just say? Do you have any idea how many girls from the best families are practically lining up to marry into our family? Mom, Elliott interrupted. He stood up and walked over to my side, wrapping his arm around my shoulders. He leaned in, his voice dropping into that sweet, cajoling tone he used whenever he wanted to charm me. Freda, sweetheart, stop making a scene, okay? I know my mom can be insensitive. I'll talk to her later. His hand was warm, his thumb gently rubbing my shoulder, like he was soothing a stray cat that had bared its claws. In our 3 years together, this was always his move when I got angry. And every single time, I had softened. But not today. I pulled away from his touch, refusing to look at him. Elliott, you just said my mom is used to serving people and quick on her feet. Do you honestly think there's nothing wrong with that sentence? He blinked, then let out a heavy, weary sigh. I was just stating a fact. She works in home care and cleaning. Why are you acting like it's a dirty secret? Sweetheart, it's not like I look down on her. When he called me sweetheart, his voice was genuinely tender. But that tenderness was exactly what made my skin crawl. He truly, from the bottom of his heart, did not see the insult. I turned to look at my dad. He had been sitting silently the entire time, his knuckles white around his water glass. The price tag on his new suit sleeve hadn't even been fully snipped off. Before we left, he had adjusted his tie in front of the mirror 4 times, asking my mom if he looked too old-fashioned. Now, he looked up, his lips trembling slightly. He said only one thing. Freda, let's go. We're done here. The sound of his chair scraping against the hardwood floor was loud and harsh. Elliott reached out to stop me, his fingers wrapping firmly around my wrist. Freda, are you seriously going to ruin everything over something so trivial? Trivial? I looked back at him. You let your mother treat my mom like hired help, and you think that's trivial? His smooth facade cracked for a split second, but he quickly recovered, flashing that airy, bohemian smile that only artists can pull off. Okay. My bad. I apologize. I'll take you to that Italian place you love this weekend to make it up to you, deal? I didn't answer. I helped my parents up and walked out of the restaurant. In the hallway, my mom kept her head low, staring at her shoes. Freda, did I embarrass you? I stopped, turning to wrap my arms tightly around her. She felt so thin, her shoulder blades sharp against my palms.
Mom, no.
Never. You didn't do anything wrong. My dad stood in silence for a long moment before he spoke quietly. Sweetheart, if you really love the boy, I can swallow my pride. I don't want you going into a family where they make you feel small. Back at my rented apartment, I made up the fold-out bed for my parents and boiled some water. My mom took the mug, hesitating before she spoke. Freda, I've been thinking, maybe you shouldn't be so hard on Elliott. His mother is difficult, but Elliott really does love you. Look at all those paintings he does of you. His friends, his social media, everyone knows how much he adores you. I don't care about my pride. I just want you to be happy. I knelt down and took her hands in mine. They were rough, like sandpaper, with deep lines that no soap could ever wash clean. 15 years of scrubbing other people's floors had left their mark. Mom, your pride is my pride. She stared at me, tears welling in her eyes, before she hurriedly wiped them away with her sleeve. My dad muttered from the doorway, "Let's get some sleep. We'll figure it out tomorrow." I couldn't sleep that night. At 1 a.m., my phone began buzzing continuously. Elliott had sent over a dozen texts. The first few were playful. "Sweetheart, if you're mad, yell at me. Just don't ignore me. Freda, Freda, Freda. At least send a silly emoji." Then the tone shifted. "You can't seriously be calling off the wedding over this? The invitations are already printed." The last message was a voice note, 38 seconds long. I tapped play. His voice was low, laced with a mix of exhaustion and genuine confusion. "Freda, I honestly don't get what you're so angry about. My mom is just like that. She's like that with everyone. I'm not her. I have never once judged where you come from. You're my muse. You're the center of my art. Isn't that enough?" I stared at the ceiling, leaving it on read. He had painted me dozens of times. Last year, his piece, The Camellia, had sold for $300,000, and everyone in his circle knew it was a portrait of his girlfriend. But I remembered a private gallery dinner he'd taken me to. I had worn a dress that cost me 2 months of savings. He had looked at me, smiled, and gently tucked a stray hair behind my ear. "Next time, let me pick out your outfit, okay? Your taste is a little too rustic." And last Christmas, when he drove me back to my hometown, seeing the cracked asphalt and the rundown bungalows at the edge of town, he had rolled down his window, taking a deep breath. "No wonder you have such grit, Freda. Kids who grow up in places like this have a raw, primal survival instinct. It's beautiful." He had said it with genuine admiration, the way an art critic might praise the rough, textured brushstrokes of a painting. But my parents weren't brushstrokes. They were human beings. The next morning, I took my parents to the train station. Just before going through security, my dad turned back and slipped a thick white envelope into my hand. "Freda, this is some money I put aside. Take it. Just in case you really don't go through with it. It's good to have your own cash. Keep your head up." The envelope wasn't very thick, but I knew it represented more than half a year of his pension. My dad gave me a reassuring smile and walked through the gate. His back was slightly stooped, his new suit hanging loosely on his frame like it was still on a hanger. 3 days after my parents left, Elliott showed up. He stood outside my apartment door, holding a bouquet of white roses and a box of pastries from that bakery I loved. He was wearing his black cashmere turtleneck, the one I always told him he looked best in. His hair was slightly messy, falling perfectly over his eyes. He looked devastatingly handsome. "Sweetheart, come on, open the door."
"I'm sorry."
"I'm so sorry." His muffled voice drifted through the door. "If you don't open up, I'm just going to sit in this hallway until you feel bad for me." I unlocked the door and let him in. He walked inside, taking a quick, almost imperceptible glance around my tiny, 700-square-foot rental. A tiny flinch of his brow, gone as quickly as it came, replaced by a warm smile. He sat on my small sofa and took my hand, his thumb stroking the back of it. "Have you had time to cool down? The invitations are out, the venue is locked in, and the deposit is paid. If you're still mad, I'll make my mother call you and apologize herself." I pulled my hand back. "Elliott, let me ask you something. Anything. If my mother weren't a housekeeper, if she were a university professor, would your mother have demanded she serve her soup?" He went quiet for a beat, then let out a soft laugh. "Freda, my mom is just old school. She treats everyone like that. It has nothing to do with what your mom does for a living. And honestly," he paused, looking at me with gentle pity, "class differences exist. It's not something I can personally erase overnight. But I chose you. Isn't that what matters? I chose you." He had said those words so many times before. Every time, they sounded like charity. "You chose me, so I should be grateful?" He frowned. "Why do you have to put it like that? That's not what I mean." "Then what do you mean?" He took a deep breath, stood up, and walked over to the window, shoving his hands into his pockets. "Freda, I mean that the gap between our backgrounds is a real, objective thing. The fact that I don't care about it. Doesn't it show how much I love you? But you can't expect my mother or my entire family to just pretend that gap doesn't exist. I looked at his profile against the window, feeling a strange, hollow calm wash over me. He was being entirely honest. He did love me, but his love came with a quiet, persistent condition. I was expected to be grateful for his tolerance. Elliott, I said, if one day you couldn't paint anymore, if you lost every dime you had, do you think my parents would make you wait on them? He turned around, blinking. He had clearly never considered the question, because in his world, such a downfall was an impossibility. They wouldn't care about your bank account or your family name. I continued, because you'd be the person I chose. But your family cares. And deep down, so do you. For the first time, his composure cracked. He opened his mouth to speak, but his phone cut him off. He glanced at the screen and stepped into the corner to answer it. Hey, Mom. Yeah, I'm at her place. We're talking. Don't worry, she's just hurt. I'll smooth it over.
Right.
Don't cancel the invitations. Send them out. He spoke with his back to me, his voice lowered, but in the quiet room, every word was crystal clear. I stood up and pulled the front door wide open. Get out, Elliott. He hung up, a flash of genuine panic crossing his eyes. Freda, I'll give you my final answer about the wedding soon. He stared at me for a long moment, then sighed. He walked over and pressed a soft kiss to my forehead.
Fine.
I'll give you some space. But Freda, please remember, I really do love you. After the door clicked shut, the faint scent of his expensive cologne lingered in the air. I walked over to the trash can and dropped the white roses inside. Over the next few days, Elliott came by every day, leaving flowers, pastries, little sketch notes slid under the door. He played the part of the penitent lover perfectly. On the fifth night, he called, his voice unusually solemn. Freda, I had a long talk with my mother. She's stepping back from the wedding planning. We can do whatever you want. I remained quiet for a moment. Really? Really? He paused, his voice dropping into a cautious, delicate tone. There is one thing we need to discuss, though. What's that? The guest list. As you know, the people attending are mostly from my father's business circles and the art world. My dad was thinking. Thinking what? Well, it's going to be a very formal affair. We're worried your parents might feel out of place, or that they'd just feel uncomfortable with all the cameras and formality. My dad suggested it might be easier on them if we set up a private, high-quality live stream for them to watch from home. Then, right after the wedding, we can fly back to their town and host a quiet, intimate family dinner. It'll be much more relaxed for them. My grip on the phone tightened until my knuckles ached. Elliott, are you telling me my parents aren't allowed to attend my own wedding? It's not that they aren't allowed, Freda. It's just finding a way that's more comfortable for everyone. Comfortable for everyone, or comfortable for your parents? Freda, please listen to me. I've taken a lot of heat for this relationship already. My mother wanted me to marry Senator Ward's daughter, and I said no. My dad's friends told him I was throwing my life away, and I fought them all off. I fought my entire family to be with you. They are making one small request. A small request? I cut him off, my voice barely a whisper. Telling my parents they can't watch their only daughter get married is a small request? Freda, can you try to see this from my perspective? I've made so many compromises. He sighed, his voice reverting to that gentle, condescending tone. Be reasonable, sweetheart. As soon as the reception is over, I promise we'll drive down to see them. We can even bring them back to the city to stay with us for a month, okay? I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I understand, I said quietly. After hanging up, I sat on the edge of my bed for a long time. I remembered when my dad first found out I had a boyfriend. He had been so excited he couldn't sleep. He dug out his 30-year-old wedding album, pointed to my mom's faded dress, and said, "When you get married, Freda, I'm going to buy your mother a beautiful dress, just like this one, so she can sit in the front row and look at you." I didn't cry. Instead, I dialed my mother's number. "Mom," I said when she picked up. "You and Dad don't need to come down for the wedding." There was a brief pause on the other end. "What's wrong, sweetheart? Did we cause trouble again?"
No, Mom.
"I'm not marrying him." A long, heavy silence stretched over the line. Finally, my mother spoke softly. "Okay, Mom will be waiting for you to come home." I hung up and immediately started packing. Elliott sent a text. "Sweetheart, the dress arrived. Do you want to come to the studio tomorrow to try it on? I want to see you in it so badly." Followed by a string of kiss emojis.
I didn't reply.
He sent another. "Freda's still mad? How about I have them deliver the dress to your place? You can try it on there and send me a picture." Oh, and I talked to my mom. She promised to be on her best behavior at the ceremony. The next morning, a courier delivered the dress. I looked at the custom gown draped over my bed, French lace, hand-beaded pearls, fabric that easily cost 6 figures. It was breathtaking. It looked like a beautiful, glittering cage. I carefully folded the gown, packed it back into its pristine white box, and set it by the front door. Then I opened my suitcase and began packing my own life. I didn't take much. The jewelry, the designer bags, the silk dresses he had bought me, I laid them all out neatly on the bed. I only packed the old canvas backpack I'd carried when I first arrived in Chicago, the envelope of cash my dad had given me, and the mason jar of peach preserves my mom had quietly tucked under my pillow during her visit. On the lid was a piece of tape with her shaky handwriting. Freda's favorite. The wedding was scheduled for Saturday. On Friday evening, I walked out of my apartment, rolling my suitcase behind me. Before leaving, I left a note on top of the wedding dress box. Elliott, here's the dress. If my parents aren't worthy of attending this wedding, then I'm not worthy of it either. I turned off my phone, stepped into the cool night air, and disappeared into the city. The next day, Saturday. The grand ballroom of the Drake Hotel was a sea of white orchids and crystal chandeliers. 300 guests sat in gilded chairs under the soft, glittering lights. Elliott stood near the entrance in his custom tuxedo, holding a glass of champagne he untouched, his eyes darting to his watch every few seconds. 9 a.m. The bridal suite was empty. 9:30 a.m. My phone went straight to voicemail. 10 a.m. He sent his assistant to my apartment. A few minutes later, a text popped up from the assistant. Elliott, the apartment is completely cleared out. There's nothing here but the wedding dress box and a note. Elliott stared at the screen, the easy smile slowly draining from his face. Behind him, the soft murmur of 300 high society guests began to grow louder. Victoria hurried over, her face pale with fury under her heavy makeup. She hissed in a harsh whisper. Where is she? Where is the bride? The silence in the grand ballroom did not break. It curdled. The soft, ambient hum of a harpist playing in the corner suddenly felt absurdly loud, every plucked string vibrating against the tense air. Victoria's face was no longer pale. A blotchy, violent red was creeping up her neck, clashing terribly with her custom Valentino. Elliott, she whispered, her voice sharp as a razor, though she kept her smile plastered on for the benefit of the guests watching from the foyer.
Where is she?
This is a joke. Tell me this is some ridiculous performance art. Elliott didn't answer. He stared at his phone, his thumb hovering over the screen. He dialed Freda's number again. The number you have dialed is currently unavailable. The automated voice was flat, mechanical, and entirely indifferent to the 300 people waiting behind him. His father, Richard, stepped forward. He was a man who measured the world in assets and liabilities, and right now his only son was looking like a massive liability. Elliott, Richard said, his voice low and commanding.
What is the
meaning of this? The mayor is in the second row. The gallery owners from New York are here. Fix this. She's not coming, Elliott murmured. What do you mean she's not coming? Victoria's composure finally snapped.
She
grabbed his arm, her manicured nails digging through the fabric of his tuxedo. We gave her everything. We let her into this venue. We tolerated her background. We even offered to stream the wedding so her family wouldn't have to feel out of place. How dare she do this to us? How dare she humiliate our family? Elliott looked down at his mother's hand. For the first time in his life, the sheer force of her outrage didn't intimidate him. It just sounded incredibly grating. She left the dress, Elliott said quietly. Then find her. Victoria hissed. Call her friends. Go to her apartment.
drag
Her back here if you have to. We are not going to be the laughingstock of the city. Her apartment is empty, Mom, Elliott said, his voice flat. He looked out at the sea of white orchids, the crystal chandeliers, the guests who were now openly whispering and glancing at their watches. The glittering world he had lived in his entire life suddenly felt incredibly flimsy, like a painted stage set that a single gust of wind could knock over. He had always believed he was the one making the compromises, the one stooping down to pull Freda up into his light. But looking at the empty aisle, he realized something that chilled him to the bone. Freda hadn't been clinging to him for survival. She had been holding him up.
and
Now she had simply let go. I need to go, Elliott said, turning on his heel. Elliott, don't you dare walk out on this crowd. Victoria screamed after him, forgetting to keep her voice down. But Elliott was already running. He pushed past the heavy oak doors of the ballroom, ignoring the startled gasps of the guests, and ran down the carpeted hallway of the Drake Hotel, his tuxedo jacket flying open. He burst through the revolving doors into the crisp autumn air of Chicago, his eyes scanning the streets as if he might somehow see her walking down Michigan Avenue in her old canvas backpack. But the streets were crowded with strangers, all of them moving with their own purposes, entirely unbothered by the collapse of his perfect world. The train ride back to Ohio was long, noisy, and remarkably peaceful. Freda sat by the window, watching the towering skyscrapers of Chicago slowly shrink, replaced by the sprawling industrial suburbs, which eventually gave way to the flat, brown fields of the Midwestern countryside. She felt a physical lightness she hadn't experienced in 3 years. There was no weight in her chest, no constant, anxious checking of her phone to see if she had said the wrong thing, worn the wrong shoes, or embarrassed Elliott in front of his wealthy friends. When the train finally pulled into her small hometown station, the air smelled of damp earth and wood smoke. It was a humble place, the paint peeling on the station sign, but to Freda it felt solid, real. Her dad was waiting by the platform. He wasn't wearing his new suit today. He was in his familiar, faded flannel shirt and work boots, his hands tucked deep into his pockets to shield them from the autumn chill. When he saw her step off the train, carrying only her old canvas backpack, he didn't ask any questions. He didn't look disappointed or shocked. He simply stepped forward, took her bag from her shoulders, and wrapped his arms around her. "Welcome home, Freda," he said, his voice rough but steady. "Hi, Dad," she whispered, burying her face in his shoulder. The scent of sawdust and cheap tobacco on his jacket was the most comforting thing she had felt in years. They walked to his old pickup truck, the engine roaring to life with a familiar, comforting rumble. As they drove down the cracked asphalt streets, Freda looked at the rundown bungalows, the local diner with its flickering neon sign, the hardware store where her dad had bought his tools for 30 years. Elliott had called this place raw and primal. To him, it was a gritty backdrop that made her look more interesting in his paintings. But to her, it was just home. It was a place where people didn't perform their lives, they just lived them. When they reached the house, her mom was standing on the porch, wearing an old apron over her sweater. She looked anxious, her hands twisting the fabric of her apron, but the moment Freda got out of the truck, her mom's face cleared. She hurried down the steps and met Freda at the gate, pulling her into a tight, desperate hug. "I made your favorite," her mom whispered, her voice trembling. "Beef stew.
And
I bought those rolls you like from the bakery." "Thanks, Mom," Freda said, blinking back tears. "I'm really hungry." They sat at the small kitchen table, the yellow light from the overhead lamp casting a warm glow over the worn linoleum floor. They ate in silence for a while, the only sound the clinking of spoons against ceramic bowls. Finally, her dad set his spoon down. "Freda, about the wedding and the
boy."
"It's over, Dad," Freda said quietly, looking him straight in the eye. "I left him. I left the dress. I'm not going back." Her mom let out a soft, shaky breath, her hand reaching across the table to cover Freda's rough fingers. "We were so worried, sweetheart.
We thought we ruined it for you.
When we came back, your father couldn't sleep.
He
kept saying he shouldn't have stood up, that he should have just let her say what she wanted." "No," Freda said, her voice firm. "You didn't ruin anything.
You saved me. If I
had walked down that aisle, I would have spent the rest of my life apologizing for who I am. I would have spent the rest of my life watching you two be treated like second-hand citizens by people who aren't half as decent as you are." Her dad looked at her, his eyes shining in the dim light. He slowly reached into his pocket and pulled out the thick white envelope he had given her at the
station in Chicago.
He laid it gently on the table. "You didn't use it," he noted. "I didn't need to," Freda said. "I have my own savings from my job. But thank you, Dad." "Keep it," her dad insisted, pushing the envelope back toward her. "Use it too. Get on your feet. You're a smart girl, Freda. You've got a degree, you've got
talent.
Don't let those people make you think you're small." Freda looked at the envelope, then at her parents' worn, loving faces. For 3 years, she had lived in a world of high-end French restaurants, designer dresses, and five-figure art sales, yet she had never felt as rich as she did at this exact moment, sitting at a laminate kitchen table in a drafty house in Ohio. A month passed. Freda didn't waste time wallowing. She took a job at the county library working in the archive section. It was quiet, meticulous work, cataloging historical documents, preserving old photographs, and helping local residents trace their family histories. The pay wasn't much compared to what Elliott's circle spent on a single dinner, but it was steady and more importantly, it was hers. She rented a tiny, sunlit studio apartment above a bakery on Main Street. Every morning, she woke up to the smell of fresh bread and the sound of birds in the maple trees outside her window. She bought a second-hand bicycle, started reading books she actually enjoyed instead of the art theory volumes Elliott always insisted she study, and spent her weekends helping her dad build a new shed in the backyard. She had completely blocked Elliott's number, deleted her social media accounts, and severed all ties with her life in Chicago. But Elliott had never been good at accepting things he couldn't control. It was a Tuesday afternoon in late October. Freda was sorting through a collection of 19th-century land deeds when the bell above the library door
chimed.
She didn't look up immediately, busy carefully placing a fragile document into a protective plastic sleeve. Freda. The voice was soft, hesitant, but instantly recognizable. It sent a cold shiver down her spine. She looked up. Elliott was standing at the end of the aisle. He looked different. The effortless, bohemian perfection was gone. He looked
exhausted.
His hair was messy, but not in the styled way he usually wore it. He had dark circles under his eyes, and his expensive wool coat looked slightly crumpled, as if he had slept in it. Freda carefully set the document down, her hands steady. Elliott, you shouldn't be here. He took a step forward, his eyes wide, devouring the sight of her. I've been looking for you for weeks. I went to your old apartment, I called everyone. Freda, please, just let me speak to you for 5 minutes. That's all I ask. There's nothing to talk about, Freda said, her voice quiet so as not to disturb the few patrons in the library. The wedding is over. I've moved on. How can you say that? Elliott's voice cracked, a desperate edge creeping into his tone. He reached out, trying to take her hand across the counter, but she stepped back, out of his reach. We were together for 3 years, Freda. We loved each other. You can't just throw all of that away because of one bad dinner, because of some stupid words my mother said. It wasn't just one dinner, Elliott, Freda said, looking at him with a calm that seemed to frustrate him even more. And it wasn't just your mother.
It was
you. Me? He looked genuinely bewildered, his chest rising and falling quickly. What did I do? I defended you. I told my mother she was out of line. I told my family I was marrying you no matter what they thought. I fought for you, Freda. You didn't fight for me, she said softly. You fought for your right to be a martyr. You wanted everyone to see how noble you were for choosing a girl from a lower class. You wanted to play the hero who rescued the poor girl from her gritty, survival instinct life. But you never actually saw me as your equal. That's not true. Elliott pleaded, his eyes filling with tears. You're my muse, Freda. Look at my paintings. You're the only thing I've ever painted that had any real life in it. Since you left, I haven't been able to pick up a brush. The gallery is demanding new work. My agent is breathing down my neck. And I'm empty without you. Freda felt a sudden, profound pity for him. He truly didn't understand.
To him,
her departure wasn't a tragedy of lost love. It was a loss of inspiration.
She
was an object, a beautiful canvas he had tried to paint his own narrative onto. If you want a muse, Elliott, go find someone else, she said. I'm a person.
I
have a life. I have parents who love me, and I'm not going to spend my life being your artistic accessory. I can change, he whispered, stepping closer, his face desperate. I'll do whatever you want. We don't have to live near my parents. We can move to New York or Europe. I'll buy us a house wherever you want. I'll give your parents money, whatever they need, a new house, a retirement fund. Just tell me. Do you hear yourself? Freda asked, a faint, sad smile touching her lips. You still think everything can be fixed with your family's money. You think you can buy my parents' dignity. You think you can buy my forgiveness. I'm just trying to help, he cried out, his voice rising, causing an elderly woman at the nearby study tables to look up and frown. I don't need your help, Elliott, Freda said firmly. And neither do my parents. Now, please leave. If you don't, I'm going to call the sheriff, and this town is very small. Everyone will know exactly why you're being escorted
out.
Elliott stared at her, his lips parting in shock. He looked around the quiet, dusty library, then back at Freda. He saw the absolute lack of hesitation in her
eyes.
For the first time in his life, he realized his charm, his money, and his talent meant absolutely nothing to the person standing in front of him. He took a slow step backward, his face pale. "You're really not coming back." "No," Freda said. "I'm home." Without another word, Elliott turned and walked out of the library, the bell above the door chiming a lonely, final note behind him. The winter in Ohio was harsh, but Freda found a strange comfort in the cold. She spent her evenings reading by the small radiator in her apartment, listening to the wind howl against the window panes. Sometimes she would go to her parents' house and she and her mom would bake bread together, the kitchen smelling of yeast and sweet cinnamon. Her dad's health had been improving since he didn't have to worry about the stress of the wedding. With the money Freda had saved and a small loan from the local bank, they had started a small independent home repair and gardening service. Freda designed the logo and the flyers, and her dad was the boss, choosing his own hours and his own clients. For the first time in his life, her dad wasn't working for wealthy people who looked through him as if he were glass. He was working for his neighbors, people who knew him by name and offered him hot coffee when he finished repairing their porches. One evening in late January, Freda was scrolling through an art news website on her computer. She hadn't kept up with the Chicago art scene, but a headline caught her eye. Rising star Elliott Vance's solo exhibition canceled amid creative crisis. She clicked the link. The article was brief but telling. It described how Elliott had failed to produce any new work for his highly anticipated winter
show.
His gallery had released a statement citing artistic differences, but the rumors in the art world were harsher. Insiders claimed his latest attempts were hollow, repetitive, and lacked the vibrant soul of his earlier pieces. One critic wrote, "Without his signature subject, Vance seems to have lost his voice entirely, proving that his talent was perhaps more dependent on his muse than his own vision." There was a photo of Elliott accompanying the article.
He was standing outside a
gallery, looking thin, tired, and deeply unhappy. Freda looked at the photo for a long moment. She felt a brief pang of sadness for the boy she had once loved, the boy who had sketched her portrait on napkins in quiet coffee shops when they first met. But the sadness was distant, like looking at a picture of a stranger in an old book. She closed the tab, shut her laptop, and went to bed. Spring arrived, melting the snow and bringing the smell of damp earth and blooming lilacs back to the valley. On a warm Saturday in May, Freda's parents hosted a small backyard barbecue to celebrate the first anniversary of her dad's new business. The yard was decorated with simple string lights, and the grill was loaded with burgers and fresh sweet corn. A dozen neighbors and friends from the town were there, laughing, drinking beer, and talking about the upcoming summer harvest. Freda stood on the back porch, watching her parents. Her dad was standing by the grill, wearing a clean apron, his face bright as he shared a joke with the local hardware store owner. Her mom was sitting on a lawn chair, surrounded by three of her friends, laughing so hard she had to wipe her eyes with a napkin. They looked happy. They looked dignified. They looked exactly like who they were, and no one was asking them to be anything else. Freda's phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out. It was an email from an art foundation in Cleveland. 2 months ago, she had quietly submitted some of her own historical archival illustrations, delicate, detailed ink drawings of the town's old buildings and natural flora, to a regional exhibition. She hadn't expected much, but she had wanted to try creating something that was entirely her own, free from anyone else's expectations. She opened the email. "Dear Ms. Miller, we are pleased to inform you that your series, The Roots of the Valley, has been selected for our upcoming summer showcase. Our committee was deeply moved by the quiet dignity and meticulous beauty of your work." Freda stared at the screen, a slow, warm smile spreading across her face. She didn't feel a rush of wild, triumphant pride. She didn't feel the need to call a gallery or post about it online or prove her worth to anyone in Chicago. She just felt a deep, quiet satisfaction. "Freda," her mom called out from the yard, waving her over. "Come get some corn before your dad burns it all." "Coming, Mom," Freda called back. She slipped her phone into her pocket, stepped off the porch, and walked down into the yard, her feet sinking into the cool, green grass. The sun was setting, casting a long, golden light over the garden, and for the first time in her life, Freda knew exactly where she belonged.